And once again, it's time to ask the question whether you really think it's about time that we standardize the school schedule and start everybody after Labor Day so we can all have that one last great weekend together. I truly believe that. Yeah, I know it's one of those topics that never goes away, but it's a good one. And I think it's worth reopening and addressing the issue once again. I mean, every couple of years we talk about it anyway. So why not today on the eve of Labor Day weekend? Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. And let me give you the number here is 663-1270. I mention this because it's back in the news again. A number of states have laws now basically requiring school classes statewide, the public school system that is, to begin after Labor Day. Minnesota, right next door, also Michigan, Virginia, and now my old stomping ground, Maryland, home of the Baltimore Orioles. Love them O's. Orioles. Hey, Baltimore's a great town. Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, described as a moderate Republican. I didn't think there was such a thing anymore. Oh, he's a moderate Republican? Oh, he's a rhino. He's Republican in name on what? He doesn't want to use nuclear weapons against immigrants. Oh, he's a rhino. Whatever. Anyway, Governor Larry Hogan, who has made boosting Maryland's economy the centerpiece of his administration, said that delaying the start of the school year is good for businesses, family, and the environment. Now, it's a little different situation. I understand that. Because in Maryland, you do have a very significant recreational... A big part of the economy there is recreation, especially summer. They've got a town called Ocean City, which is right on the ocean. And every year, Ocean City becomes the second largest city in the state of Maryland because of all the people crowd. Ocean City is kind of like a mini Miami without the palm trees and also without the relatively warm winters. After Labor Day, the town pretty much empties out and it becomes just a few thousand people through the following springtime, through Memorial Day weekend. But the point is, Maryland does have that aspect of their economy, the recreational thing. So it's pretty significant economically. A lot of people are working in Ocean City through Labor Day, which for most of us is the last big weekend of summer. Now, that specifically is not as much of an issue here, obviously, but I do think it's a good idea to give families, especially on the last weekend of summer, the last big blowout of summer, that one last weekend. And there are businesses in North Dakota, there are seasonal businesses like your Dairy Queens and places like that do hire on summer work. And right now, on the cusp of what should be one of, if not the biggest weekend of the summer season, a lot of these businesses are going to be left hanging. They're going to be sitting there with something flapping in the breeze because all of their summer help had to leave to go back to school. Well, that's not right. And I just don't think, I just like the idea of having that one last big weekend. So let me put it to you. In my opinion, my take on it is there are a number of good reasons for doing it, for just standardizing the whole thing and saying the entire public school system in North Dakota should start the school year on the Wednesday or Thursday after Labor Day and run it through maybe the end of May or even the first or second week of June. Now, I don't see a problem with that. I think there are some good arguments for it. I don't see a lot of really strong arguments against it. Well, there's one, which I'll get to a little bit later on. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, much of the argument against it, and of course we've had this on a referendum a couple of years ago. I think it was, 2014? It was a referendum. It was the last time it was a referendum, and it got shot down like 55 to 45. which is kind of a landslide, isn't it? But I don't hear a lot of strong reasons to oppose changing it, making it that way like they just did in Maryland. Mostly it's, we just don't do things that way in North Dakota. Yup. Yeah. Making all kinds of friends and influencing people. But you get the point, okay? So tell me, would you rather your kids start school after Labor Day? Would you be in favor if it came to a vote again? I guess people change their minds on this kind of thing. And it wasn't so long ago that there was no way you could get a gay marriage thing passed in North Dakota. Now, I'm not so sure. People do change their minds about these things. They evolve. They develop. They see the world in different ways. Plus, it's a generational thing. One generation dies off and so on and so forth. But the point is, I want to see whether I just want to get a handle on whether the public sentiment on this has shifted in the last couple of years. Do you think the kids should all wait until after Labor Day to go back to school? In the state of Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan, Republican, moderate, has said basically he has ordered the public schools in the state to extend the summer recess until after Labor Day, effective 2017. And yeah, he's getting a lot of resistance on this. Of course, the opposition party is resisting it, mainly because they're the opposition party. But it does say, I came across an article in the Washington Post. His efforts run counter to the trend of starting school earlier in many parts of the country in an effort to bridge the racial and socioeconomic achievement gap, maximize opportunities to prepare students for standardized testing, and limit the time that working families need to pay for child care. Now, I've heard these arguments before. Well, if they're strong arguments, I have yet to hear them presented in a strong manner. So if you think you can change my mind on this, I invite you to try and do so. Because I like the idea of having the kids get that one last weekend, Labor Day weekend, with the whole family together to have one final big family, good old-fashioned all-American cookout, blowout, whatever, before the kids go back to school. That's where I stand. Number here, 663-1270, 663-1270. Love to hear from you. I invite you. I'm a cool guy. You think you can change my mind on this? Take a shot. No, I won't bite too hard. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. More conversation, your calls coming up.
Right now, 70.
The home for ABC News at the top of the hour is Super Talk 1270.
Every couple of years they talk about having a referendum. Or actually, they did have one. I think it was 2014. They had the most recent one about adjusting the school year and starting all the schools, the public schools, after Labor Day. Let's find out where you stand on this. What about the idea of waiting until after the Labor Day weekend for your kids to go back to public school? Number here is 663-1270. And you're on Super Talk 1270. Go ahead, ma'am. Thank you for calling.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hey, I wanted to say that last year I lived in Fargo, and the swimming pools closed the second week in August because all the lifeguards had to go back to college and this and that. And, then we got our 90-degree weather, and, no swimming pools for the kids. And, Memorial Day weekend is usually pretty icky anyway, so usually it rains. So if they had to be in beyond Memorial Day weekend, I don't think it would be as much of a problem. Also, I was thinking about running the air conditioning. That's a major expense, too. So
another thought I had was the fact that a lot of the schools in the rural areas still don't have air conditioning. So a lot of those kids, when they go back, it's still going to be pretty warm for them.
Right. And they might still be harvesting, too, and there's a lot of extra traffic and stuff going on that, I don't know, it's not really a good time to Yeah, I think it should be federal. I think it should be across the board.
Okay.
Federal.
I appreciate your comments, ma'am.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much for calling Super Talk 1270. Well, there you go. Do you think it's time to change the school schedules? Yeah, I know we've talked about it before, but every couple of years it comes up again. Every time some state, in this case it's Maryland, the governor of Maryland has decided to order the public schools in the entire state to extend their summer recess until after Labor Day, effective next year. And you know about the reasons, school after Labor Day. In the case of Maryland, you've got the economy built around the resort area, Ocean City, Maryland. And they have, which is a very big part of the state, Maryland state economy. Not so much here. We don't really have any resort areas like that here to speak of. I mean, mostly we have a lot of recreational areas, and we do have a lot of people, a lot of businesses that are kind of seasonally based. And they really get the short end of the stick. Like the lady was saying about the swimming pools. And all the lifeguards have to quit their jobs to go back to school because they're all teenagers or college students or whatever. Well, that's not right. Let them stay on till after Labor Day. That's what I say. Number 663-1270, 663-1270. I was just looking at this. You heard about this latest Trump thing. Now, as a rule, I don't like to get into the whole political thing on this program because there's plenty of other places where you can get that. But somebody on the Trump team, the Latinos for Trump, which in and of itself is very amusing. It's like, I don't know, it's like Mormons for free porn for everybody. It's probably just as big a group. But anyway, the Latinos for Trump spokesman is saying that if we don't elect Donald Trump, we're going to have a taco stand on every corner. Speaking for myself as someone with a passionate love for Tex-Mex cuisine, I mean, do they really think that's a bad thing? I'd love to have a taco. I love taco. I could live on tacos the rest of my life. I love them. Taco stand on every corner. Hey, I'm there, pal. I'm there. Just make sure that you use a good hot sauce. See, that's how you tell a really good Mexican or Tex-Mex restaurant is the sauce. You walk right in, you sit right down. First thing you do, of course, is they bring out the chips and they bring out the sauce. And if you want the extra hot stuff, you can ask for that, and they'll bring that out for you. But that's where you can really tell right off the bat. You know in the first 5 minutes if you're dealing with a really good place, a place where they really know how to do the Tex-Mex cuisine, is if they've got that kind of well-made, homemade hot sauce that burns the hair off your tongue. It's like a Chinese restaurant. It's like judging a Chinese restaurant based on the mustard, the hot mustard. If the mustard is really hot, if it sets off an alarm in your mouth, then it's probably a pretty good restaurant. They probably know what they're doing. That just seems to be the way it works. But yeah, free taco stands, a taco in every corner, a chicken enchilada in every pot. All right. Okay, back to the issue at hand here. Governor Hogan of Maryland, a place I know very well, has issued an executive order, telling the public schools in the state to extend their summer recess until after Labor Day. Usually the way they do it in these states is you have your Labor Day weekend, everybody comes home the day after Labor Day, and then on Wednesday or Thursday is when you start, everybody goes back to school. I'd like to see that done here. What about here? 663-1270. Now, one issue that did come up was how the teachers feel about this. If you're a teacher, well, why aren't you in school right now? But aside from that, if you like to weigh in on this issue, I really like to hear your perspective as well. Number 663-1270. Starting North Dakota school after Labor Day. By the way, there's a great, what's the name of that? I'm trying to find the name of that site. Oh, here it is, Ballotpedia. Like there's Wikipedia and Encyclopedia and thispedia and thatpedia, I got a pedia. Well, there's Ballotpedia, which is an encyclopedia of American politics, including records of various referenda around the country. And they have an entry here on the referendum from November 2014, the issue we're talking about, which at the time they voted on in here in North Dakota. It was statutory measure number 8. They voted on it. It was voted down. Specifically, it said start North Dakota public schools after Labor Day. And they shot it down. Now, what's interesting about this is they spent a fair amount of money on the pro side of this campaign, virtually nothing on the opposition side. The opposition won anyway. And I just don't see, maybe there are some strong arguments against it. I haven't heard them. I'm not hearing them. Mostly what I'm hearing, and I don't want to make a straw man thing out of this. It's, nobody likes the guy who beats up on a straw man, I want to hear some solid arguments from you guys who are against this. And by a solid argument, what I mean is do not call and say, well, it's just how we do things in North Dakota. You got to do better than that. People wake up every morning and hit themselves with a stick. Yeah, we get up every morning, hit ourselves with a stick. Why? Well, that's just how we do things in North Dakota. Now, you got to do better than that. Come on. 663-1270. And we'll get back to this in a couple of minutes here. Some other things. The other day we were talking about the quarterback who didn't stand for the national anthem. And we got into a little bit of a rigmarole about that. And I wanted to come back to it just very briefly, if only to pose the question, and we could talk about this. Do we really need to play the national anthem before every sporting game? Is it really necessary? This whole thing started, as I understand it, started during World War II, when the country was at war. Well, it's been a while now since we've had a war. And I think it's just kind of something we started doing back then, and we kept doing it. It just got to be a habit, and now we do it to the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. Always talking about showing your patriotism and supporting the troops and loving your country. But, if it's just an empty gesture, what's the point? People make a big stink about not standing up to sing the stupid song at the beginning of a ball game or football game. Meanwhile, you've got homeless veterans in this country digging somewhere in a dumpster to find a peach pit so they can subsist. And they go to the local VA hospital, and the guy says, well, son, can't really help you. We ain't got the budget for it. But by God, we're all proud Americans. We all stand up during that national anthem. You see what I'm getting at here? We support the troops in all the wrong ways in this country. So what about it? What about the whole question of, it's the Colin Kaepernick, that was his name. And it's something that I don't think anybody really has a good answer for it. Other than, hey, you're a liberal. You're a libtard. That's my favorite, libtard. Yeah, that really shut down the argument, didn't it? But why do they play the national anthem before games? They don't do this anywhere else in the world. Do they do it in Canada? I think they do it in Canada. No, what it is, they do it in Canada when we're there. Because they do their national anthem, they do ours, or whatever. But to me, it's just another one of these classic non-issues that people get worked up over. And in the process, we lose sight of what's really important here. And we don't pledge allegiance. We don't sing the anthem before movies or plays or concerts. So why this socially enforced show of patriotism at a football game? All right, World War II. I can understand that. I can dig that. But how did it become such a tradition and an issue to the point? I think what probably happened was after World War II, the Cold War kicked in, and with the growth of the fringy right wing in this country, and McCarthyism and all the other stuff that came along with it, the whole anti-communist thing, I think that probably had a lot to do with it. But what's the point? I just don't get it anymore. It's just an empty gesture as far as I'm concerned. Number here is 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. Love to hear from you. More conversation, your calls coming up.
Right now, 70.
On Twitter, Facebook, online, and YouTube. supertalk1270.com.
So you're going to a football game this weekend, or maybe even a baseball game, whatever the case may be, and you're going to sit there and they're going to play the national anthem and everybody's going to stand up and going to feel real good about themselves and then sit down and watch the football. Okay, what have we accomplished? That's the pressing question. And of course it comes from the whole, it was kind of lost in this whole Colin Kaepernick debate. And it's a question that nobody really has a good answer for. Why do we play the national anthem before games? Oh, because you hate America. That's the best answer you get from most people. 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. Speaking of Colin Kaepernick, boy, did he go over the deep end the last couple of days. Did you see the deal with him and the socks he was wearing to practice that one day? He had these socks on during a scrimmage, during practice. The socks had little caricatures, little depictions of pigs in police uniforms. Dude, the 60s are over. And, you know, I was with you on this whole national anthem thing. I still am, but, you know, win friends, influence people. Come on, you know. At least meet us halfway on this. I don't know. 663-1270. It's the pressing question. And, yeah, it's a non-issue, which is kind of the point. You know, we don't sing the national anthem before. Well, I actually heard of people singing the national anthem before concerts or the Pledge of Allegiance. By the way, I've got a real big issue with the Pledge of Allegiance anyway, because of that one nation under God thing. That's not my pledge. I prefer the original pledge, which didn't have the under God thing. That was something that was a little history lesson. That was something that was added during the Cold War, because it was supposed to separate us, distinguish us from the godless communists. Well, speaking as a godless, not a communist, but a godless American, I've got a real problem with that. So I don't go for that. I like the pledge, except for that one nation under God thing. So, and as long as that stays in the pledge, though, I'm not big on the Pledge of Allegiance. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. The other thing we've been talking about, of course, is whether it's time to reconsider whether to mandate starting school after Labor Day. Because, you know, a lot of families, they like to have that last weekend together. It is the last chance to have a real good time with the family before the whole fall thing starts up again. And there are a lot of businesses. There are seasonal businesses. We don't have a big resort area here. We don't have a big recreational economy, but we do have businesses that are seasonal. We've got your Dairy Queen and your public swimming pools. They hire lifeguards, and most of the time, those lifeguards, they're high school or college students. And somewhere around mid-August, in a lot of places, we heard a lady from Fargo, so there was a case in Fargo, they had to close the public pools the second week of August because all the kids who were lifeguards had to quit to go back to school. Yeah, if you want to go swimming, I guess you're just out of luck. So you can weigh in on that as well. The state of Maryland just mandated by decree of the governor there that they're ordering all the public schools in the state to start school at the same time a couple of days after Labor Day. Usually the way it works is you have your Labor Day, and then Tuesday, everybody comes home Monday or Tuesday, and then Wednesday school starts, or Thursday. And usually the first couple of days is like a half day, and then the following Monday you have your first full day at school. Yeah, I can work with that. That's how I did it when I was growing up. Well, that's the way I always did it. Well, that's not the reason to do it, but it's a good thing, I think. And your calls are welcome here. 663-1270. Let's talk about retiring. Now, you and I are not likely to retire at the age of 65. Well, I'm already 60. And let me tell you something. I ain't going to be nowhere ready to retire financially at the age of 65. It just ain't going to happen. I'm just basically going to try to take care of myself, and with a little luck, health holds out, continue working for a while. I kind of like working anyway. Not crazy about it sometimes. But, yeah, I kid about it, but I don't see myself retiring at 65 or even 70 for that matter. Hopefully my health will hold out. I can work. Well, there was a seminar on aging and psychology where they said that working past retirement age is good for you. It even helps your physical, your emotional, your cognitive health. It's good for the economy. Since you're going to be paying taxes and you'll be drawing later from Social Security, and I don't want to get in that argument right now, but I will tell you this. When my dad retired, he sat there for about a month and he went nuts, and he finally called his old boss and he said, listen, can I come back on a part-time basis? And he did, and he's glad he was. Some people just need to work. It's a good thing. All right, 663-1270. Hi, you're on Super Talk 1270. Thanks for calling. Whoops. Hi, you're on Super Talk 1270. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I guess I'm like you. I believe that it should be carried after Labor, or start. It's supposed to be started after Labor Day weekend.
Now, do you have a family, sir? Are you a father?
No.
Okay.
I have the closest I have are nephews and nieces, but they're all past that age.
Yeah.
But I just think what the lady said earlier about the weather, and it's a better chance that August will have higher temperatures than June. You know, like you were saying, with the schools that don't have air conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the point. The point we are making, and I'm not the first one to make it, obviously, was that a lot of these schools out, not so much here in town, in cities like Bismarck, but out in the rural areas, they don't have air conditioning. Which is, they're fine for the winter, but right now they'll have a problem.
I think one of the new schools here in Bismarck didn't put air conditioning, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
100% sure. One other question I have for you. You said you're from Maryland?
Well, I lived in Maryland. I'm originally from Delaware.
You live there?
Yes, sir.
Or from the area? The governor, can he make a blanket? Wouldn't that be something that would be set in law? Can he just overrule a law and do something like that in Maryland?
That is one of the questions that they're addressing. Apparently, they're kind of fuzzy on that issue right now. He went ahead and did it, and yes, he is getting some opposition from this, especially from the legislative of the legislators of the opposition party. So it's a good question, actually.
I would think just any legislator would question if it didn't something like that just in the law.
Yeah.
Or like here, wouldn't it be the Department of Public Instruction that would set that?
Well, maybe it's a case where he thinks, well, if I do this now and everybody gets used to it, then they'll just kind of have to sign off on it. Maybe. I don't know.
But what I'm getting to is more of a constitutional issue. Isn't that above his executive powers as governor?
That's a very good question. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to see what the deal is with that. Because, it's an excellent question. I'll see what I can find out here. Thank you for calling Super Talk 1270. What we're talking about here is the fact that the governor in Maryland, not North Dakota, but the governor of Maryland, ordered the public schools in the state to extend summer recess until after Labor Day. Now, I'm in favor of the idea of starting school after Labor Day, an executive order by the governor. And the question is, can he do that? Well, Maryland, I don't know. I think if he tried to do it here, he'd have a bit of a fight on his hands. It looks like he has a fight on his hands anyway. But I don't see anything here. I've got somebody gave me an article here from the Washington Post, which the Maryland Senate president, who is a Democrat, the governor's a Republican, and the Maryland Senate president is calling the executive order extraordinary and legally questionable. So it's probably one of these fuzzy things that kind of falls through the crack in the state constitution. But the important issue for us is to address, the school question itself. However it comes about, is it a good idea to start the public schools after Labor Day? I, for one, think it is. Number here is 663-1270, 663-1270. And again, the other thing we're talking about here, are you ready to retire at 65 or 70? I know I'm not. No way. And although I do like my job, it's not so much that, it's just I'm not financially ready for it. I mean, I could if I had to, I guess. Hopefully, I knock wood, my health holds out. But they're saying now that working past retirement age is good for you. I mean, like I say, my dad, who was a bricklayer all his life, and at 65, he retired. I guess why he retired at 65, I don't know, because I remember when he stopped working, he went nuts for about a couple of months, and then he went back on a part-time basis to keep his hand in it, just to have something to do. You hear these horror stories about these folks who retire and then they just kind of they die. A few weeks later, they're dead. And I'm not trying to make a joke here. It's a valid thing. So are you ready to retire at 65 or 70? You tell me. 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. More conversation, your calls coming up.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night, I should be sleeping.
Super Talk 1270. Yeah, the Beatles from the Hollywood Bowl concert, which I understand they're remastering and re-releasing. I ain't gonna get that one. They got that movie coming out this fall that Opie directed, Ron Howard, called 8 Days a Week. It's all about the Beatles and their touring years. And it's an interesting time to talk about this because a couple of days ago, this past Wednesday, the 31st, Saturday, it was 29th. Okay, it was this past Monday. Monday the 29th was the 50th anniversary of the last concert appearance by the Beatles. It was that concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. Coming off a really god-awful tour. And the whole story about their touring years, which started off, all fun and goofy and wacky. If you saw Hard Day's Night, the movie, they kind of caught that spirit with the Beatlemania and all the fun stuff. But it stopped being fun sometime around 66, about the third year into it. They started having problems, issues. They weren't selling out every venue. They had some, I don't want to say, what's the word? Blowback, backlash from a couple of issues. A lot of it had to do with John Lennon being very outspoken, and he made the comments about religion in that one interview in England, and it was interpreted, rightly or wrongly, as John saying the Beatles are bigger than Jesus Christ, or whatever. And there was a lot of backlash in the Bible thumper corners of the country. They played Memphis, Tennessee at one point, and a firecracker went off, and Brian Epstein thought for a minute that one of the guys had been shot It got that bad. Then they went to the Philippines. You remember Ferdinand and Melda Marcos? Well, the Beatles accidentally snubbed an invitation by the Marcos, by Mrs. Marcos, to appear at some little fascist wing-ding that she was holding. And she took great offense, so she went to her husband, and next thing you know, the Beatles are pretty much being run out of the Philippines on a rail, more or less. Not literally, but not quite literally, but it was pretty close to that. So it was not a good year for the boys in terms of touring, but it's a fascinating story. And the whole story of how the touring went into making them what they became. Because what they did in the studio a year later was, of course, in many ways, a response, a reaction to what they experienced when they were on the road during that last ill-fated tour. Wasn't there something that happened? Weren't they supposed to play in, I know they played Minneapolis in 64, but wasn't there something that happened? Weren't they supposed to go back to Minneapolis at some point and something got messed up and the police department had to call in and cancel it? I have a vague recollection of that. I haven't been able to find out anything about that. It was mentioned briefly in one of the documentaries many years ago that they went to Minneapolis and there was some kind of issue. They had a run-in with the chief of police or Brian Epstein or the management. They had issues with the police security, and they pulled out of the concert. I don't know if you could set me straight on that, you local guys, or if you lived in the Twin Cities for any length of time, send me a note because I'd be curious as to what that was all about. I remember they played a clip where they interviewed some. I think it might have been like a deputy sheriff or the chief of police, and how disgusted he was with the whole thing, and he never wanted to hear about the Beatles again. Yada 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 yada. Let me know if you know anything about that. I'd like to get the story behind the story. Supertalk1270.com. You can leave a comment there or at my email address, jim.walsh@townsquaremedia.com. I'd like to know the full story. I suppose I could. I have a friend in Philadelphia who does a Beatles show. Andre Gardner. He hosts a syndicated show called Breakfast with the Beatles. And you can hear it not here in Bismarck, but it's available online. If you want to hear it, send me a note. I'll steer you in the right direction. But yeah, so I remember 50 years ago, God, I was just starting the 5th grade. I was just starting middle school. And it was probably the worst time of my life. Because I truly believe that for any kid, probably the worst time of their life is middle school. Because you're right there, you're really stuck in the middle there. You're just old enough to be aware of how crappy you got it. Yet you're not old enough to do anything about it. When you're younger, before you start to think about yourself and think about your life, your obsession is with toys and cartoons and maybe sports to some extent. Then you get a little older, and then you start to realize, hey, this is not such a good deal being a kid. I can't do anything. I can't take a leak without getting permission from somebody. Boy, I don't miss those days at all. And high school wasn't much better for me. Although high school was better in one sense, I didn't get bullied in high school. I got bullied a lot in middle school. There's just something about that certain age where you're trying to find yourself. And it seems to bring out the worst in a lot of kids. So I would have been starting 5th grade right about the time that the Beatles were finishing up that last tour in San Francisco at Candlestick Park. So it was a period of transition for them and for me too. And all I can say is I'm kind of glad that I had my music and the Beatles and the other bands at the time. It was one of the things, even at that age, I was 10 years old, but even then I was starting to get into the music, and it's one of the things that helped me survive. It's kind of why I'm here today doing this. Started out as a disc jockey, a DJ. But it all started when I was 10 years old. I got that little transistor radio for Christmas. And I started walking around everywhere with that thing pretty much attached to my ear. I think they finally had it surgically removed when I was 12. That was a joke. Paying attention? Thank you. So, if nothing else, I'm thankful to the Beatles and all the other great bands of that era for helping me survive the most god-awful period. Tell you what I'm going to do. Let me back this thing up a little bit here, because Ron Howard, he's got that. Here it is. Ron Howard has got that movie he's doing. It's coming out very shortly, and as part of the movie promotion, they've done some remastering on some of the old Beatle live recordings, like the one they did at the Hollywood Bowl, a very famous recording where they did their old set at the Hollywood Bowl back in, I guess it would have been 64, 65, whenever. And from what I hear, it sounds really good. But I've got an old clip from that Hollywood Bowl, and we're going to end the show today with a little Beatlemania magic from the Hollywood Bowl, circa 1964, 5, whatever. Just listen to the screams.
1, 2.
That was John, by the way. Sorry, girls, he's married.